Hello, everybody, and welcome to Tim's Take. I am Tim, and this is my take on It, the 1990s version directed by Tawny Lee Wallace, starring Tim Curry. I figured with the new one coming out, I'd go ahead and check out the old one and review it, and then maybe go see the new one and review it. I'm saying It a lot, which is especially funny since the movie's actually called It. The original was a 3-hour, 2-part TV miniseries starring Tim Curry as Pennywise the Clown, the dancing clown to be more specific, aka It, who kills and eats children. There's a group of kids that eventually call themselves the Losers Club that band together to fight the creature, only for it to come back again 30 years later. And they must regroup once more, hopefully to defeat him once and for all. Now, this movie had a huge impact when it came out. It kind of became a classic in a way. Just everyone, it kind of got a reputation of just ruining people's lives. So many people have a fear of clowns because of this movie. It led to a lot of people's sleepless nights. There were plenty of people I talked to who said they had a fear of clowns, and I, having not seen It as a child, was just kind of confused. I always thought clowns were dumb, but I was never afraid of them. People said, if you saw It, then you'd understand. So I figured when I saw the movie that it would be a pretty scary movie. And I actually have seen Tim Curry on, I forget which show it was. There was some Criminal Minds-ish show where he played a killer or whatever he was. In any case, he played a bad guy, and he was a pretty creepy bad guy. So I figured he could probably play a really creepy villain in a horror movie. I was really disappointed. I saw it and was not very happy with it. I thought the ending of part 1 was just the end, because I felt like it was pretty much on par with the rest of the movie. To be like, yep, it just ends that way. Okay. So I just left it. I didn't realize there was a part 2, or I just forgot, or I just didn't care. I honestly don't remember. But I figured I'd come back to it, try to look at it with an open mind, and try to evaluate what was bad about it specifically, but also to try to find the good things about it that make it not terrible if it's not 100% terrible. Pretty early on, we're introduced to the fact that the movie is going to be bouncing back and forth between the adults and the kids pretty much the entire movie, which it does. Part 1 focuses mostly on the kids and then shows a little bit of where the adults are now, and then Part 2 has the adults coming back to Derry, Maine. In Part 2, they had a scene where they kind of come together for dinner, just to kind of get together, hang out for a bit before they go fight It again. And I thought that would have been a good place for them to all just come together, and that would be our introduction to the adults, instead of cutting it in like they did in part 1, because I really, really didn't care about the adult storyline. I just wanted to go back to the kids storyline. And I actually thought that the kids were really, really interesting to watch. They kind of had a group dynamic that went really well. It was fun hanging out with them, even though I think the acting all around was overacted. It was just kind of silly and overdramatic. The kids were tolerable. I thought the kids were actually still kind of fun. It kind of made more sense for the kids. The adults, it was a little bit off the entire way through. There was a certain part where they kind of get together, and it's almost like people are back together, so they kind of revert back to their childhood ways, being with their childhood friends in their childhood hometown. It kind of felt okay at parts, but most of the time it just felt off. There were a couple scenes here and there. One in particular, there is the two guys, the first two that get back together. They kind of hang out as if they were still kids and just kind of reconnecting, and that was really fun. It easily could have failed, but it worked for me, and it was a fun little enjoyable scene. But there were few that worked that well. And let's not forget the terrible ending to part 1, where there's a lady who finds a dead character, and her response is to give all of the most ridiculous facial expressions in an attempt to, I guess, convey sadness and fear simultaneously. I don't know. It's way overdone, and it's laughable. You'll have two reactions. You can either crack up at it because it's ridiculous, or just go, that's not good. That's not good. For the longest time, every scene is following one of the main characters of the Loser Club. But then there's just one random scene where you're following one character's wife, and that threw me off bad, because I was like, wait, we've established that we're only following main characters. Why are we following her now? So then I kind of started thinking about it, and I was like, oh, okay, so maybe they're going to make her a main character starting now. We're going to see her progress. She's going to meet with the Losers Club, and she's going to help them out. But no, that's not what happened at all. It was totally useless. They should just not have had her in there at all. In the process of initiating the flashbacks, the whole movie is full of these weird slow fade transitions and quick zoom close-ups before switching, and it made me laugh half the time. So if it was going for a dramatic effect, it completely failed. And all throughout the movie, it's full of scenes that just seemed like they chopped the end off. It just disappeared, and they were like, well, we can make it work as long as we just put a slow fade at the end of it. That'll pretty much take care of the problem. But no, you have all kinds of scenes that don't have conclusions. There's one scene in particular where Pennywise is after one of the kids, and he's got him cornered. He specifically tells him there's nowhere you can go. And then he shows his fangs, and it's all creepy, and oh no, he's going to kill him, and then it just fades out, and it's like, well, what happened? Am I supposed to assume he died? We know he didn't die because we see the adult version. So what happened? How did he get out of there? Did Pennywise just give up? But really, that's something he does all the time, is he has the perfect opportunity to kill somebody, and then just leaves. He just scares them and then runs away. But we'll get more of him later. A lot of the movie relies on this belief system, where if you believe something, if you truly believe that it can happen or can work, it will. For example, do you think that an inhaler can melt the face of an immortal supernatural being? Yeah, as long as you believe hard enough and say it loud enough, I guess. There's all kinds of things like that. If he's about to come kill you, what do you have to do? Just tell yourself he doesn't exist. If you believe that he doesn't, then he's gone. Which would be fine if he didn't really exist, but evidently he does. I don't know, it's really confusing. And really that's the biggest problem with the creature that I had, is that it just doesn't make any sense. How he functions doesn't make sense. Why he makes the choices he does doesn't make any sense. It's really dumb. He constantly has a chance to kill kids, and he just doesn't. He seems like he'd be the greatest prankster in the world, but also the worst killer, even though we're supposed to be afraid of him because he's the biggest child killer ever. He just kills them all and feeds off of them. But we don't see him kill very many, and he leaves all the main characters alone except for to scare them. He scares them, and that's it. I guess there's one moment where he tries to eat somebody, kinda, but he doesn't do it very fast. He says at one point that they taste better when they're scared, so that implies that he's doing his best to scare them as much as he can before he eats them, because he wants them to be really, really terrified because they'll taste better. But why not hurry up and eat these ones that actually could hurt you? The only ones that are posing a threat at all. Eat them quickly, and then all of the other people, you can take your time and scare them before you eat them. Because if these guys kill you, you're not going to eat them. You're not going to be around to eat them. But instead he eats all the unimportant characters really quickly, because they're unimportant to the plot, and leaves the other ones alone except to scare them a little. Doesn't make any sense. In part 2, they bring up this new concept that he's got these deadlights, where he basically pulls you into a trance. How come he didn't use that in the first one? It wasn't even brought up in the first part. If he had that ability, he should have been using that the whole time. It would have been way easier. They wouldn't have been able to fight back if he used that ability. It just doesn't make any sense that he would have saved that for later. It would have made more sense if he didn't have it as kids, when they were kids, and this was something that he got over the course of the 30 years when he came back again. But in part 2, they say that he had it in the first one, so now it makes no sense. That's more about the character of It. As far as the more specific version of It, which is Pennywise, I thought Tim Curry at first was actually kind of scary as him. He's got this really creepy, weird voice that he does for it that's pretty unsettling. And the first time you see him, you only get 2 shots. It's just a really quick, there's kind of him trying to get the girl's attention and seem harmless. She kind of has her guard down. Then you see one shot of him, obviously with sinister intentions. And then you kind of see from his perspective, instead of seeing him attack her, you see from his perspective approaching her. And you can kind of imagine how he looks. And that was probably one of the more effective scenes, with him in it anyways. But that's the only time they use him that sparingly. It's kind of the Jaws factor, where it was done by accident. They wanted to have Jaws in the movie more often. But Jaws is more scary because you don't see the monster. During the one time where you see the shark, he looks kind of fake. And it actually is more effective to see him less because of that. But in this movie, they progressively show more and more and more of him all throughout the movie. In the second scene, he's also pretty effective. He's got his creepy voice. The way he kind of lures the kid into a false sense of security is actually really both unsettling and pretty well done. Until he gets to the final line where he sounds less creepy and more like Tim Curry, then it starts to sound a little off. And then they show the teeth, which is just really overdramatic. It's like they think if you get a close-up of something that's a little bit creepy and then like move the camera around it and make it really close and hold on it for a while, that makes it creepy. It doesn't really, especially if it looks silly. It's just kind of like, oh, look at this creepy thing. It's so creepy. That doesn't work. That doesn't do anything, at least for me. Maybe it works for other people. I also really didn't like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre when they had 7 super quick cuts on the lady's face, as if that was creepy. It just looks sloppy to me. But maybe that's just me. But then all the other times you see him, he gets less and less creepy. And by the time we get to part 2, he's actually funny. I laughed out loud several times because of the things he was doing. Like, he's just making random jokes. Like, do you have Prince Albert in a can? Well, you better let him out. Waha! 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 It's so dumb. But it's kind of funny. And then after that happens, I sit there and go, was I supposed to laugh? Because it was funny. Or was it supposed to be, is he supposed to be creepy because he's messing with the character right now? It doesn't seem creepy to me at all. It's just funny. And actually that kind of made things worse in other parts where they had a scene that was working without Pennywise. There was one with Bev when she gets back to her old house as an adult now. And it actually is working out pretty well. It was pretty tense. There's some stupid character choices, but you're kind of yelling at the screen going, don't do it! Don't! No! Stupid! And then Pennywise shows up, and it's no longer scary, it just starts getting funny again. He's just like pretending to beat his head against the post. And he just looks goofy, and he's funny. And it's like, oh, but then at the same time, I was enjoying that scene. It was actually working a little bit. Dang, Tim Curry, why you gotta be so funny? As far as the other things that don't involve Tim Curry, there's a lot of things that do work and a lot of things that don't. Like I said, that scene with Bev actually worked pretty decent. There was the dinner scene where they're all kind of hallucinating the food or whatever, and it's all kind of creepy. And that was actually one of the times where special effects worked pretty decent. You can tell that it's not completely real, but it works well enough. But then there's some other things like balloons are just everywhere. It's like, oh my gosh, there's a balloon. That's terrifying. Except it's a balloon. There's something terrifying about balloons. There were a couple of scenes that did work where there was one in particular, again with Bev at her house, this time as a kid, where a balloon kind of comes out of the sink drain, pops, and blood goes everywhere. That one kind of worked a little bit. And then Dad comes in and is trying to figure out what she's screaming about, and he doesn't see the blood, which kind of scares her even more. He kind of touches the drain with getting blood on his hands, and then he touches her face, getting blood on her face, which is just even more creepy. Or just kind of scary from her perspective at least. And that scene kind of worked. And that was about the only thing that worked with the balloon, but it was almost had nothing to do with the balloon. There's another scene where they kind of try to do the same thing, where they have balloons all over the room, and it's kind of splatting in people's faces, and he sees the blood go on their faces, but they don't. It didn't work at all. It was just like, yeah, we kind of saw this earlier. All the time, there's just balloons everywhere that don't work. It's just like, yeah, they're balloons. One guy opens a fridge, and balloons go all throughout the room, and you're like, huh, interesting. There's balloons everywhere now. Wonder how they got in the fridge. Strange, but not particularly creepy. And there's a lot of scenes, including like a moment that comes right after those balloons, where something happens and it starts to be like, oh, this could be creepy, and then it's like, oh, I can't tell if I'm supposed to laugh or be scared, but I'm not really either one. I don't know what I'm supposed to be, but it's not working. And it happens all the time throughout the movie. As far as the special effects, whether it's with Pennywise or without, they're just terrible. And I understand in 1990, which I guess technically if it was released in 1990, it would have been in the late 80s that they would have been in the middle of making it. With that time frame, in that time period, you don't have great technology with a low budget. So you have to be very careful with what you do when it comes to special effects. And they had some things that seemed like they might have been cool ideas, but they didn't have either the budget or the technology or both to get it to look right. And I felt like instead of doing this cool idea that you can't make look right and is going to look terrible, instead of doing that, you should find a way to work around it and get the same idea across, but not actually show the specific thing that you need the special effect for. Try cutting away from something and coming back to seeing what resulted instead of seeing it happen, because seeing it happen is the part that just looks bad. And sometimes when you improvise like that, it can turn out better than the initial plan. Like I mentioned before with Jaws, they didn't plan on not having the shark very often or not seeing the shark in full, but that made it even better than it probably would have been. So sometimes you gotta find a way to improvise around those problems, and it can even benefit in the end. All in all, it's not horrible. There's some good things in it. The Losers Club is enjoyable. Even the adults are tolerable sometimes. Tim Curry kind of is creepy in some parts, but then also funny in other parts. So if you can kind of be okay with getting both in the same movie instead of just expecting funny or just expecting scary, that can kind of work. I think that sort of makes it enjoyable. Although I think it would have been better if they had kind of limited his appearances and made him stay creepy the whole time instead of the goofy guy that's ringing a bell trying to make a lot of noise so that the other guy can't talk to the person he's talking to. Man, that was a weird choice. But you can get some fun out of that for sure. There's some scares that sort of work, and don't get me wrong, there's no moment in the movie that's completely terrifying. There's some that just kind of work decent. There's some creep factor. There's some unsettling bits. Go ahead and check it out if you want. From what I hear, the new one though is a lot better. The new one, I think last I saw, was about 93% on the tomato meter, which is going to change because it's only just releasing to the public. I'm planning on going to see that one. Maybe if I see that one, I can review it, and I can tell you then if you should see that one instead of this one. From the sounds of it, though, you would be better off seeing the new one. If you're looking for it to actually be really scary, that is. To be fair, not everybody wants a really, really creepy movie. Sometimes people just don't do well with scares. And that's my take on It, the 1990 version. Let me know what you thought down in the comments below. I know there's a few things that I had opinions on that I didn't address. I'd like to see if you got other opinions that I didn't mention. Maybe we can start a little dialogue down there and discuss what we got out of it. Because that's what I love doing, is talking about movies and actually having a discussion about what we got out of it. If you like the video, hit the like button to let me know. If you want to see more videos, hit the subscribe button. If you want to be notified every time I have one uploaded, hit the bell. And with all that said, I want to thank you for hanging out with me for a little while. And hope to see you again soon, talking movies.